Howdy everybody. I wanted to do a separate video from my reading of this initiative 1495, just to go a little more in depth with my commentary. The main thing I wanted to, one of the main things I wanted to say is that if you want to do not trust or even expect to become educated or learn anything about this initiative through the media, through any news media. If you really should read it and understand it for yourself. When you're not going to be able to question anything about this initiative from the group that is pushing this initiative. You're not going to be able to get, if you try to go to their, it's the Alliance for Gun Responsibility. If you try to go to their Facebook page and ask them questions, just question it. If you don't essentially blindly support this initiative, they're going to just ban you if you just ask a simple question. If there is any, if they can get any sense that you are actually a, an actual gun owner that's a little bit skeptical about this initiative, they're going to ban you from being able to make posts or make comments on their Facebook page. You also will not get any answers to your questions if you send them an email or something of the sort. You should not expect anyone who truly, there's people who are truly, you won't be able to convince them otherwise or convince them of what the initiative actually says. They read the initiative, they see the intent, and they expect that that this act will do exactly what it says, when intent does not necessarily mean the initiative will end up doing what was intended. Just like the Affordable Care Act didn't make healthcare cheaper or more affordable, and the Patriot Act has nothing to do with being a patriot. Now, I wanted to kind of address this whole suicide thing they put in here. It's, as you should understand, the the Alliance for Gun Responsibility does not actually care about dealing with suicides or violent crime. They only care about the confiscation of firearms, as you should have the understanding of from this, from reading through this initiative. This initiative is about confiscation of firearms and not about helping people with suicidal tendencies. And also, you should understand, anytime any individual or group states that their gun control laws are that are essentially okay according to the Constitution, they are straight out lying. I know there's probably, there's lots of people who believe that there is some, if you truly believe any kind of gun control is allowed, you're either ignorant or lying, or you really truly do not know. But it's wrong. All gun control is essentially illegal. But anyways, to get back to the suicide thing, what do they have 30,000. They gave the number of 30,000 people are victims of gunshot. Well, 100,000 people are victims of gunshot wounds, and 30,000 of those victims lose their lives. Now, ultimately, they come to the point where, what do they say? This they want to suspend access, access to guns. They they want to give the government the power to confiscate firearms, but which has nothing to do with dealing with suicide or violent crime. Uh, if we go to the website for suicide statistics, we can see that 42,773 Americans die by suicide every year. Now, about 50%, just under 50% of those suicides, the person uses a firearm to kill themselves. So that leaves just over 50% of suicides are done through other means. So we have about 21,000 people die when commit suicide with a gun. So at most, they're going to reduce if if all guns just disintegrated into thin air and everyone forgot how to make a firearm, at most 21,000 suicides would be eliminated. But with the other forms of suicide, other ways of committing suicide, I would have to say that people are more than likely to, some of those 21,000 suicides that were done with a gun are going to translate over to other means of committing suicide. So you're not really going to reduce suicides by 21,000. You're only going to reduce how people commit the tool that which tool or change the tool that some people will commit suicide with. 25 people attempt suicide each year. That's over 1 million people will, you know, will essentially or potentially could, well, are potential candidates for what this initiative does. Though that's, these numbers are for the entire population. If we look at the suicide rate or suicide for just the state of Washington, that's about 1,111 people commit suicide each year in Washington, which makes a suicide rate of about 15.8 suicides per 100,000 people, which is above the national average of 12.93 suicides per 100 people. Now, as we can see, suicide is committed 3.5 times more often by men than women. So you'd have to say about four, 3 out of 4, or 3 out of 4, or 4 out of 5 suicides are committed by men. And I believe that there are issues that our system of government have in place that essentially drive men to commit suicide. There, 7 out of 10 suicides are white males, and the highest rate is in middle age. Now, if we understand how things work in our Western society, we have a tendency to favor women over men, and minority skin colored people over white males in particular. And this would have to drive, this is what I believe is a driving factor to the male suicide statistics, in which I would have to say that, dealing with what drives men, and more specifically middle-aged men, to commit suicide sh- should be what the focus is, instead of, taking their firearms, because the majority of people this initiative is going to affect is not violent criminals. It's people who are accused of potentially going to that are being accused of being a potential person that will kill themselves, of which, instead of sending instead of sending someone to help these people deal with their mental issues, or whatever it is that has driven them to the brink of suicide, they're going to be sending police officers to take their firearms. And if these people essentially refuse to give up their firearms, they end up in jail. This has a potential of sending suicidal people to jail, in which, as any person should know, it's not particularly difficult for a person to commit suicide in jail either. So we're not trying this does not do anything to help improve the situation this person is in. This can only put this person in a worse situation. I mean, you're imposing onto someone. I mean, you're sending cops to their homes. You're potentially putting suicide people in jail who are suicidal. Uh, why it accounts for middle-aged men, white men, and why it's mostly men is what I believe is due to you know the culture of divorce. That is, we got middle-aged men. They essentially got their life going for them. They got a decent job. They got a good house, and then all of a sudden their wife divorces them, and they're stuck paying and takes the children. They're stuck paying child support. The wife takes the house, and they lose their job, and they get thrown in jail because they can't pay child support or the alimony to the woman. So what's left for a guy to do? Well, they think, well, suicide starts looking like a good option. Now, what else did I want to address? Oh, I wanted to go way down here. I think it was section 13 or 14. What we really need to know to truly understand the purpose, what this initiative does, is we look at the penalties. As we can see, the intent. Let's go read. Let me go back up and read through the intent. Is to temporarily prevent individuals who are at high risk of harming themselves or others from accessing firearms by allowing family household members and such to claim that they need to take firearms. And well, first of all, what does it take to get one of these emergency protection orders put in place? Well, it's the it's 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 a claim from somebody that that a person may that they believe or think that someone will commit a violent act either upon another person or upon themselves, or yeah, the what it takes is someone can claim just to claim that a person will either commit that they believe a person will commit a violent act upon another person or upon their own person. And what and the evidence to enable one of these orders is just a claim, and the evidence is ownership, access to, or intent to possess firearms, or evidence of the person recently purchasing a firearm. Those are two things. It's not, there's a few other things that are basically common sense that well, everything else is basically common sense that the person never should have been able to possess a firearm in the first place. But the other things are, but that doesn't have to be the evidence. You can simply claim that you think they're going to be violent, and if you can show that they recently bought a firearm or are in possession of a arm, that's enough for a emergency protection order, in which the whole point of the emergency protection order, the difference between a regular protection order and an emergency protection order is the fact that the person that the order is filed against owns firearms. So then we go down back to section 13 for the penalties. That you are guilty of a misdemeanor. This makes a person a misdemeanor for being in contact, being touched, just simply doing it as much as touching a firearm while the protection order is in place. And if you violate the order, or have previous convictions of violating the order, you become a felon. If if you were, even if it ends up there's no real grounds to have the protection order, to continue the protection order, but you violated it, you will be disallowed being able to even do so much as touch a firearm for 5 years from when the protection order expired. This is, the intent of this initiative is not to protect or to prevent violent criminals or to prevent suicides. It's to confiscate firearms and prohibit ownership, possession, or even touching firearms. Now, one of the one of the things that could be a problem is they limit it to family or household members. If we look at politics today, there are families out there that have real issues when it comes to politics. They can find themselves divided, wanting to hurt each other. So, your leftist snowflake family members could potentially try to, use this against you to get your firearms confiscated. And all because they believe that you might harm yourself or harm someone else. If you, I mean, it, a person, I don't really believe that might be a something that will truly happen. Intent. Like I said, this initiative has its intent. Is it the intent going to do what it says it does? No, likely not, because the intent of it, what the actual intent of this initiative is firearms confiscation and prohibition. So I'm not necessarily saying that there will be a rash of family members using emergency protection orders to get someone prohibited from possessing firearms, but it opens up the opportunity. This is not a protection order. A protection order essentially prohibits a person from coming into contact with another person. This protection order is more of an assault order in that it sends someone to the person that the protection order is being filed against to confiscate their firearms. It enables police to search someone's house for firearms and to confiscate those firearms, as well as enables a person to become a felon for refusing to allow the police to confiscate those firearms. Now, you don't have to, if you disagree with me, what I'm saying here, I am absolutely open to discussion on this initiative. I would love to have a debate with someone, an open debate with someone that is in support of this initiative or someone who pushes this initiative or whoever, someone from the Alliance for Gun Responsibility that is, thinks this initiative is a good thing. I'd love to debate them, and I'd love to get, if they believe I am wrong, I would love to hear what they have to say about it. I would love to hear how they somehow think that it is in line with the Constitution to essentially bypass the Second and Fourth Amendment. I would love to see their reasoning, to actually hear the reasoning, how they reason that it is in line with the Constitution to allow something like this to happen. So, feel free to If you think I'm wrong in what I'm asserting here, I'd love to chat. Just let me know. I'm open. I could be wrong, but from what this initiative shows, it's just a way to get firearms confiscated.